Today we're working on the F-250. We got the fuel pump in, and he's taking all the wheels off right now just because we want.
Yeah, it runs now.
Yeah, and it runs. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. And he wants to check the brakes and all that. And the one wheel was locked up because it had sat for so long. So we need to just check everything over.
And load in front tires.
What's wrong with the front tires?
Look at the tread. Feel it.
Oh, yeah, it wore uneven and stuff.
So I looked at the title. He put just under 20,000 miles on it. We sold it to him at 124. It's got 142. So it's 18,000 miles, right? 18,000 miles and the tires were never rotated.
Oh boy.
So we're gonna end up, these are, hopefully they don't have flat spots on them from sitting, but they were sitting in mud, so, or in a yard. So we might get away with these tires for a little while. I had just put these tires on before we got it.
I remember that.
And, you know, I didn't skimp out on tires. I bought them tires. But, it don't matter, don't rotate them. So we had a bit of excitement on this truck. I was waiting for a long time for the right clip for the fuel pressure line on top of the center unit. I got them from Ford, and twice it was the wrong one. And I looked at the part numbers and they said that's what it is, it's not right, doesn't fit. And then it came down to, well, that line you have to buy from that center unit forward and replace it. I wasn't going to do that, so I was taking the truck apart that I was going to scrap because I got all I needed off it, and I looked at the clip and it looked the same. So I cut the end of that connector off, I brought it to my center unit and I plugged it in, and it worked perfect. So I pulled that clip out of it and put it in ours, and it works perfect. It's exactly the right one. So I put that on, we put gas in it, and I went to go start it, and this was weeks later, you know. I went to go start it, and it cranked over, and I was priming it, because, you know, we had air in that line, and in the rails, and then it all at once went whoosh. And I know that sound, because we lost the truck to a fire before, and I knew what happened. I knew it was on fire. So I real quick got the fire out, and, you know, we have minor damages. We got a few burnt injector wires. The fuel line connector is burnt, and just minor, but it could have been so much worse because it was by the house, right next to my black truck. The 68 Camaro's in the garage, and the other thing I just bought is in the garage, and it would have taken all that and probably the house too if I couldn't have got it out because it was all so close. And when I got the fire out, I got under the hood and looked, and, you know, we've got this truck. I looked under the hood and looked for mouse nests and all that. There was nothing on the engine at all, nothing. And when I turned the key back on, the fuel was spraying underneath the fuel line onto the ignition coils. And the reason it was, the mouse is chewed on the bottom of that line, and it wasn't through, but it looks like the pressure burst the line and sprayed, and that's how it caught fire. So I'm going to replace the line, and I have to replace 2 injector connectors because they got melted, and 1 injector, the appearance of it is melted. It's not affected, but I don't want to take a chance. So the ignition coils are right there. So ounce prevention is pound of cure, but it was not any excitement I really wanted to deal with. So in the future, I will definitely inspect that fuel line a little better. I mean, I felt it. I didn't feel anything. There was no mouse nest, no debris, no nothing near it. It was clean. I had no reason to think a mouse was chewed on it, but that's what happens when trucks sit around. So today, we need to get all the brakes apart. As you can see, these rotors are, you know, rusted over. These would probably come back, but I just don't think we want to do that. I'd rather start with fresh brakes, because we'll be using this to tow a good bit back and forth to our place in West Virginia. So I'm gonna get all the calipers off. I'm gonna assess each caliper and each wheel unit as I go. We do have to pull the axle on that side because we have a leaking wheel seal I got to replace, and this is a floating axle, as you see here. So we'll get into that, but yeah, it was an interesting time. So let's get at it. So this caliper is the one that was locked up, and so you can tell that this caliper had been sticking because one, you have a little bit more lining on this side. Another is you see how hot this has been when it started rusting. So this was stuck when he was driving it.
So it wasn't just from sitting.
No, this was having a problem when he was driving it. He just didn't address it. There's nothing left on that one. The inside, when you see how much thicker it is up there. I guess it doesn't matter. We're just going to do it all. I'm just going to put calipers on it because I don't want to go through this where, you know, we go ahead and, like, these rotors are new. You can see how thick they are, and they're not horribly pitted. Like, the outside isn't coming off, so I could get them machined because these are not cheap rotors. I could have them machined reasonable. So we'll probably do that. Yeah. It's stuck. I have to get a hammer. See how it's tapered like this? So this bottom was stuck in, wasn't retracting. So whenever I do a project like this where I know I'm going to have this apart for a while, we'll use one of these bus tubs.
Well, that one's just a different tub, but our bus tubs are a little taller and
Yeah, a little
bigger.
bit deeper and bigger. We'll throw all the parts in here so they don't get lost.
It's been your buddy or something.
This one's not stuck. I guess what's really upsetting to me about this is we brought this truck from Oklahoma.
Tulsa.
And it was a Texas truck. It had no rust. I mean, look at the frame now. It still had all the factory paint on it. But this is what happens when you leave them sit in the yard and drive them in the winter and not wash them. It doesn't do well around here. Some people are their own worst enemies when it comes to this. Oh, man. Quite a bit more brake lining on that one. Rotor still looks good. So these rotors that get stuck, everybody thinks it's stuck right here, which very well could be, but they forget the fact that there's a hub that this sits on in here. That's where I seem to get most of the rust. So now we'll take this off. We're gonna let the two front rotors soak for a little bit. I guess I should point out that we checked the ball joints, because I looked at them and there's absolutely no grease on the fittings at all. They've had nothing probably since you got it. So we'll check the axle joints as well. We'll check the wheel bearing. It's frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah. Could be worse. Might be worse. We might find worse.
Yeah.
Hopefully
I don't
not.
normally hang these by the hose, but I believe we're just going to replace these hoses. So this is what I'm talking about right here. You get rust buildup here, between here, and it doesn't want to come off, but you see how well it's soaked into there. And that's how it come off. We'll get a blowgun, clean all that out there. See, these are junk too. This one's pretty even, you know, inside and outside wear, so that caliper was okay, but again, we're just gonna replace them. We'll get the rotors machined We'll put new calipers, new pads, and probably hoses. I don't know. That one's pretty short. I mean, there's not a whole lot less to go wrong there, lineal feet wise. They'll come with all new hardware in here. Wish I'd went and got that sandblaster. It'd make all this easier. That one's stuck. And we'll have to take all these apart. Of course, if I buy calipers, it might come with them. So, this wheel seal, the back of the back plate looks damp also, so we may have to replace it as well. It doesn't bother me. We're gonna have to drain some of the oil out. You might as well just do them both.
That was a lot easier than the front ones.
Look, it's wet. Both rear axle seals are leaking.
Oh, yeah, and stinky.
Yep, stinky. Yep, leaking for a while.
Oh
look.
boy, that's thick, yeah.
That makes me worry. Now I gotta check that gear oil, or at some point we need to check gear oil and see how low it is. Yeah, boy.
That one's really stinky.
Yeah. Leaking too. Alright, so the next thing we'll do is get these axles out. This is a actually this is probably a full floating. So this hub spins independently. The drive is from the axle shaft. This axle shaft right here goes into the differential. So these bolts right here attach to the hub, and that's what turns the hub. So we have to get an impact, a socket, get all these out, get a drain pan, catch all that stinky gear oil. This is probably synthetic, that's why it smells like that. I wonder how low it is. I better check that first. That's not bad. There's fluid clear up to here, so it's just lost just a little bit, so that's good. That means we have a likeliness that rear end is not hurt, harmed, whatever is very good. So now we'll go ahead and get the axles out. After you take this loose, all you have to do is smack it right here in the middle, and it usually pops off. This axle uses an O-ring seal back here, and it seals this axle inside of here. It's not encouraging. Once you take that out, then you have this. This is a all-in-one axle nut socket, or axle nut. It's got these things in here which are like locks, and that's how you set your bearing preload. So you use a tool like this. This is made by Blue Point. So it's got these tips that correspond into that lock, and then you just back it off. There's a torque spec on this. Right hand thread, left hand thread. See it? The washer part that rests against the bearing, it has a tab that corresponds in here, so you have to slide it in there when you go to put it back on.
Looks a little worn.
Hmm?
Flip it over.
It's pretty normal.
Okay. Well,
We'd be
good.
concerned if there were score marks around here. That would mean that bearing is turning, the race is turning against this, and it shouldn't. Okay, this hub. There's a pry bar. I can't get to it like that. It's so grimy.
Oopsie.
Alright, So then the next thing is going to be inspecting the bearings, which we'll put them in the, they actually look pretty good. We'll put them in the parts washer, clean them all up real good, and same thing with the hub. I can see how long that's been leaking. Look how that buildup is there. So we'll get this, we'll scrape off the bulk of this, and then we'll put it in the parts washer, because there's no sense putting that in the washer.
No.
Yeah, wipe it down the best we can first. So this is a two-piece seal. As you can see, this part is the wear sleeve, and it goes onto the axle, and then this part of the seal rides on this. And I'm surprised it failed this early. I don't really care about the parking brake being saturated in oil. We'll clean it off good, but I'm not going to replace them. That looks pretty good. This must be a wear plate, because it centers on there. After looking at this a minute, this bearing's been replaced, this race, because there's marks right here on the inside of the hub where someone was beating on it. So we have to make sure that race is where it belongs, because if they didn't put it in the right place, it could be why the bearing failed. Yeah, there's a problem here. Something ain't right. See the ring right there? How it wore. It wasn't in deep enough, which tells me that whoever put this back together likely didn't have the bearing preload set right. So this was moving around. We won't take any chances on that. We'll replace the bearings and the races both, because it's like that all the way around. And there's some light pitting too. On this side, you can see the marks in here. Will it show up?
It's so hard for me to see because the sun's so bright. I can't see the marks, but
yeah. I guess it doesn't matter. They're coming out. So we'll replace both bearings and seals on this side. I keep getting never sees on me. You can tell I was the last one to put the wheels on. Huh?
well, it's a good thing you used it as long as it's at.
Yep. All right, we'll get this in the parts washer. Get it cleaned up first. So you just take your snap ring pliers in between a couple of rollers. Oh, I should have got glasses. Just pull them out like that. Oof.
You want my
Some glasses, but I think those need replaced too. You might as well just do all of them. Only bearings on these seals. This is the hardest part. You got to get that seal out of there, and that two-piecer can be a pickle. Now, This one wasn't leaking as bad, but still leaking. So I ended up using 2 pry bars in here to get this out. Really wasn't horrible. Let that drain a little bit first. Now this one has really light wear. I mean, for what we're doing, I would trust that for another easy 100,000 miles. But let's see what the race looks like. Because a lot of times people replace the bearings and not the races. Just like this. You see the pitting here. You see how you have all the wear here. At least this one was torqued correctly. It's just worn. There's a bunch of pitting in there. So, yeah, we'll just go ahead and put new bearings in both sides. It seems like every time I get into a hub, I'm replacing bearings. I guess mostly it's because people do the repairs, but don't want to do them correctly. You should be able to see that good here. You see how it's worn. See how you got that darker spot in the middle. And you can see some parts where there's some metal transfer. I don't know if I'm over particular or someone is under particular, whatever. I guess it doesn't matter, does it?
He went ahead and took the parking brake all apart and cleaned it. Just putting it back together.
But never sees on the adjuster. Even though they'll never ever be adjusted the whole entire time I own this thing. I will guarantee you. But whatever. Not only don't want the threads to seize, but we don't want this to seize against the adjuster wheel or the threads to seize inside of there. So we want good coverage everywhere. Just roll it in all the way. And then you have to put this spring in. I believe it's probably easier to put this spring in first, but
who does stuff the easy way?
not the guy I know. This side's back together. I'm not going to adjust that. There's a rubber plug right here behind it. I wonder if I put that in backwards. Yep, I did. No, I didn't.
Quit fighting with yourself.
I thought it was facing forward.
You just need to eat lunch.
I do need to eat lunch.
You need to quit and go eat lunch.
So eat lunch. You can see this better now. See how it's metal transferred. You got pit spots where there's lines on it. And this one here, you can see right here where all the hammer marks are, where they tried to beat that in there, that race. I don't think they got it straight. So we're just going to replace them both, or all 4 of them actually. Now if they're out of the parts washer, they're clean again. There's a little dust on there, or residue of the mineral spirits, but it'll be fine. So we'll just go ahead and, yeah, you can see that line, how this was probably loose and not tight enough, which is probably why that failed, why that seal failed. You see how the line is in right here forward, so the bearing was too loose. It wasn't in far enough as far as, and that's set by the bearing preload on that outside nut. Okay, we don't have an option. We're gonna fix it right. Let's get them out.
So explain what you're doing, because I don't remember how to explain it.
Now see.
What?
All you gotta do is hit it on the right ledge.
Maybe you should put your glasses down on your eyes and not on your head.
Probably. Takes it a minute to cool down. A lot of times they'll just fall out. This is about to. I just didn't wait till it cooled. So the purpose of that is you weld a ring around it, and when you do, it pulls in on the race, makes it smaller. So you don't have to push it out so hard, you know. Got a little bit of cleanup to do on the inside, but we'll wait till it cools, take a wire wheel, clean it all up again. I was hoping I could get a part number off these, but apparently not. Ford just wants you to buy it right from them. Hubs are all cleaned up, ready to go back together as soon as we get some parts. So I'm going to order, obviously, inner and outer races, inner and outer bearings, inner seal, O-ring for the outside, calipers, brake pads, rotors, if we can't turn rotors. So I'm going to hold off ordering everything until I know if they'll machine my rotors or not. If they'll machine the rotors, I'm good with that because they're plenty thick, and I'm really easy on brakes, so I'm not worried about them warping, that's for sure. So now I'm moving on to the line here. This is the steel portion of the line that was damaged. This one was on here, and I just cut it off. The mice had chewed through the end of it, and I cut it off. That's where it was spraying fuel. So I took and cut that end off, and I was trying to get my aftermarket kit to go into here. And I could get it right up to here, but I just couldn't get it the rest of the way, and I just wasn't comfortable with it. So I cut Ford's line off of the steel line, this nylon they have. Now theirs has an extra layer on top of it that's pretty jagged still. I tried to cut as little as I could because I didn't have much to work with there. But this doesn't work. I could get it in there, but I could only get it right to here. I couldn't get it to go up on top of this part, and that valley in there is where the clamp is meant to go. Plus, because this is so much bigger diameter, I couldn't get the permanent clamp on there. So I decided to cut this off of here, and we're going to see if we can use the SUR&R fuel line and get it over this and see if it's not too much of a stretch. I think it might be. If it isn't, we'll put it over there, and you can see how the valley's in here as well. Then we'll clamp that, and we'll put our fitting on it. I can't get these same bends, but I can route it in a way to be okay, and then put some loom over top of it to protect it. I was going to make a new line, this whole thing out of nylon, because SUR&R sells these adapters. They'll take you from a steel push to connect, push to lock, whatever, to their nylon line. You notice how it's kind of stepped down there. You have a flare type swelled out edge here, and then it kind of ramps up here, and you put your clamp in the middle. So I wanted to go use that, but I didn't have enough room. You can see how much too long it would be. I couldn't make this bend, so I cut this off, and I cut it off to where I could just get this into the die to recreate that, and it's still too long because right here it wants to kink. So I can't use standard line because it needs to be, you know, reduced right here. So since I can't use regular line, I'm kind of thinking I'm going to try this, see if it can work. If not, I don't want to order this line because they only sell it with this and with the vapor line, I think it is. And it's pretty expensive from Ford, and I don't want to pay that price. So I cut that off. We're going to see if we can get ours to go on it as a test. That's what this is, just a test piece here. If it'll go on, we're going to move forward. If not, then I'll have to figure something else out. Like SUR&R, that's this kit I keep talking about, this company here. They started in Akron, Ohio, which is, you know, about an hour from me. And I used to buy their stuff right from them direct. Well, now you buy it online. But they make a fitting here, nylon 3/8 nylon to steel compression fitting. So I could literally cut this off, clean off all this paint here, put a compression fitting on here. I think I have regular compression fittings to go from one to the other. I think the diameters are different on the nylon to the steel, but I'm not sure. Alright, so I cut that off because it needed to be on this part, and I cleaned off the coating that they put on, and now it fits properly on here. So then the other side has a compression for 3/8 nylon tubing, and you see that insert, it's set up to keep the compression coupling here, the ferrule, from crushing the nylon. So you slide the nylon in there, you see it's a plastic ferrule instead of a copper or brass one. So that way it doesn't damage the line as you put pressure on it, because a nylon fuel line is thinner than an air brake line. So that's one reason I'm sure they use plastic in there. So we are ready to put this together. I think it's going to work just fine. It's always important to make sure you get a straight cut here. So you make sure you get the right depth in there. I just use these hose cutters. They work pretty well. I don't know if I can do this one-handed. Get it square on there. Hold it. Makes a nice square cut. And we'll put this on. Now, make sure there's no frayed edges. You see how thin that stuff is compared to like regular fuel line for a diesel truck. Now this just pushes on here. You got to make sure you get it seated all the way in there. Give it a twist. Make sure there's no brass on that anywhere, any filings. And just tighten her down. Now this one won't have to be near as tight as this one. So this side, because it's a plastic compression, you don't want to put all the beans to it, because, you know, you just don't need it. So we'll get this on, and then I'm going to leave it long, because I can do the compression part and the fitting in the truck on this. The only I can't do is put my loom on and my tape to hold the loom down here. So maybe, and I'll hold it back just a little bit in case there happens to be a leak. I want to be able to see it. So I don't want my loom, my tape way up here. I want it back here just a little bit, because we'll be checking for leaks for sure. These push-to-connect fittings basically just utilize this set of O-rings and then something to stop this from pulling out. So I'd like to take that on the wire wheel where the O-rings will ride and get it cleaned up so we don't tear them up as we shove it back in. So now we'll just go and weave it down through where it belongs, get it in close, and then see how much we're going to need. So I got it back in the factory holder right there, and it's back in the holders back down in here, right up there. But now I've got to deal with, this broken clip, and Ford apparently they can't seem to find the right one, so I end up taking them out of a truck that I scrapped, and this is no different. I have one more left, so hopefully I don't need any more, but I gotta dig that out first. We are all buttoned up down here. I had pulled the four-wheel drive shift lever out of here so I could get that line out of there. It was just too tight. So we're all back together. Now we just gotta terminate up on the top of the engine. Got the fuel rail out of here. I'm inspecting all the connectors. This is the farthest one forward, so it got melded. All the ignition coils look good. This was the one for the very front cylinder here for the injector, and the next one back, the injector is cooked. It came apart, and the wires are skinned. And the third one back, it's completely disintegrated. Everything's off the wire. All the insulation's off the wire. And the one farthest back, it needs replaced too. So I'm gonna pull the harness out, inspect it, but it looks like it's just the injector connectors and one injector. One injector didn't make it. It just melted beyond belief. So I'll have to replace one injector. All the other ones looked really good. So we'll go ahead and get an injector and 4 pigtails, and I'll inspect the harness everywhere, and got a lot of soldering to do to repair this. So this wiring harness is from the same era of truck. It was a 2012 V10, and I looked up replacement connectors for the 2012 V10 and for this truck being a 6.2, which I love this engine, and they're identical, same part numbers. So I brought this over just to make sure they'll plug in just fine. I don't want to cut this harness apart and then find out that they were different, but I checked them, they're okay. So we'll peel these back in the harness farther because we need them a little bit longer than what the V10 had them. So we'll come back in here and cut them out of the harness. I'm going to replace this injector, obviously, because it's no good, and I'm going to go ahead and replace all of the O-rings on the injectors on this side, since I pulled them all out. Just want to make sure that they're still sealing well. And what else? I think that's it up here. Gotta get a battery, we need wiper blades, we need oil and a filter. I'm not servicing the rear end, we're going to top it off. I'm not going to service the front axle or the transmission. I think they're fine. No leaks. As far as the transmission front axle is concerned, leave that alone. I'm going to go ahead and do this off camera because you guys have seen me solder and wiring plenty of times. This is going to be pretty tedious and boring. I was able to just de-pin these connectors because the connectors were melted, but most of the wires weren't. It was just damaged housing itself. So I was able to de-pin all of them and de-pin the new ones, and I only had to solder in 3 wires on the ignition. So what I did was I de-pinned all this, and I matched the wire color codes to the ones that I needed to solder in. Yeah, so everything's back to the same color as it was before. Definitely one benefit of using an old harness if the colors are right. I soldered it with this M12 Milwaukee soldering iron. Rick Scott told me, he's a friend of ours, he told me, he says, man, you get one of them, you'll really like it. And he's not kidding. He's right. This thing is killer. I love that thing. I just leave all my solder and some heat shrink inside there, so I always got it. But I've got all of this finished up. It's all taped back up. That one on the ignition coil that was burnt, I de-pinned the connector, slid some heat shrink over it, put 2 layers on it, heat shrinked it, heated up, and then taped it all back up. So everything is ready to go. I'm waiting on an injector. I did break these locks. Ford has these extra locks. You can see it right here. That thing slides forward and it keeps that clip from coming up so that you can't get it off. And I broke it. I'm not too concerned. I don't have any more, and if I can't find one, it's not going to bother me. It'll be just fine. They're always a pain in the butt anyway, so I think we get away with one injector and a set of O-rings. So that's not too bad. And here's again is the old injector, the one that got the most of the fire. That was pretty bad. This could have been so much worse than it was, but I know what this is going to look like before I look at it. Yeah, go figure. This was what was in it when I sold it to my brother. For any of you that don't know, this was my truck. I sold it to my brother in 2000 and I don't remember. It was only 2 years old. The truck was 2 years old. I bought it for my wife. We ran like 1 tank of gas through it. She really didn't care for it, and so I just ended up getting her another minivan. And my brother took this one, but he's just not much for maintenance. I believe maintenance is, the key to keeping them run a long time, but just not the way he does it. So I'm gonna might as well get an oil and filter. I have to get a battery. I gotta get wiper blades. I'm probably gonna end up putting 2 tires on it at least, because the old front ones are cupped up so bad. So I've got brake hoses, left and right brake hoses, left and right calipers, left and right rotors, left and right brake pads. I think that's everything there. And then here we have same thing, left and right hoses, left and right calipers, left and right pads, left and right rotors. And then we have inner bearings, outer bearings, inner seal, outer seal, rotors. Got to get some gear oil to top that off. I ordered a set of step bars for it, a nice set of chrome ones to replace those black ones that these always rot out so fast. But we'll get that, and I'm sure we'll get it running dry, and then we'll find what else it needs, you know. But so far, fuel pump, all the things I've been doing so far, my total for all the parts I'm telling you I'm putting in here, I'm over $3,000 in repairs on this thing. It's pretty sad. It was running, driving, nice truck when it left, but you know, it's just what it is, nature of the beast. So I'm gonna get all these parts. Once we do, we'll bring it back. We start to reassemble. We got, like I said, we got to put races and bearings in the rear hub, so there should be some intricate stuff, maybe some interesting work to get done. But anyways, thanks for watching, you guys. Catch you on the next one. I'm hunting the elusive wife. Sometimes you can find her in the wild. Other times you'll find her in the garden, pulling weeds in the garden. Shh, be very quiet. We don't want to spook it.